welcome to Gardening Club. Gardening Club meets once a month, and the purpose is to bring together different open source projects that are working on stuff in the Zcash ecosystem. And so the typical format is we have like some deep dive agenda items, and then if folks show up and they want to just share about a project they're working on for about 5 minutes, there's also sort of an open mic slot at the end. So if anyone's here and they want to share anything about any open source project they're working on related to Zcash, you can mention that in the chat and give a presentation during the open mic slot. Yep, so first we have some announcements, and then we're going to hear from Max about RenZEC and RenVM more generally, and recent work they've been doing with Zcash. And then we have that open mic slot for anyone who shows up, and then we can have open discussion if there's extra time, and then we'll wrap up. So first, some announcements. Over here in Zcash land, we have a new schedule for NU5 activation. So that's the next network upgrade. And this will include several zips, but the big one on my mind is Halo Orchard. So this is really exciting. It's a new shielded pool protocol. It will be on mainnet. It's using a new zero-knowledge proving system called Halo that does not have a trusted setup. So this will be the first shielded pool protocol that doesn't have that. And moving forward, eventually we'll be able to retire the old ones and sort of remove that risk from Zcash altogether. That's really exciting. And then also Halo itself is a new zero-knowledge proving system that can do efficient recursive proving, which is a key technique for many kinds of things, including various scalability improvements. So we're really excited to have that that platform in the protocol that we can begin building many new features on with a bit less cost or difficulty compared to the older zero-knowledge proving platforms. Meanwhile, at Zcash D-Land, we have a new release, 4.4.0, and this has a new feature that lets it integrate with Prometheus, which is helpful for monitoring or gathering metrics about the Zcash network. And as part of ECC's effort around NU5, we have announced an initiative called Halo Arc, where we are refining our products to really sort of double down on the promise of Halo and bring private usable Zcash to more users. And there's this important usability improvement we're working on called unified addresses, which is a feature wallets can use, and we believe it will help sort of simplify interaction across the ecosystem and simplify some of the negotiation users have to do between different address types currently. And so we're really excited about this making it easier for wallets that are shielded by default to interact with the broader ecosystem. And hopefully that will allow more rapid adoption of shielded by default wallets. So super exciting stuff there. And now, oh yes, also, it's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. And now, we're going to hear from Max about stuff going on over in Renland and how it's connecting to Zcash. So let me switch over. Max, do you have any screen share you want to do?
Yep. Got some slides. There we go. So I want to go 15 minutes, and there's a lot I could talk about, but I'll be focusing on the program we've been launching, trying to bootstrap liquidity for Zcash. So we have Zcash wrapped on Ethereum right now, We've had that for over a year, and we're expanding to different smart contract chains. And one of them is Binance Smart Chain. So we got a little grant, and we put a little bit of money of our own to sort of create a liquidity mining program for Zcash on Binance Smart Chain. I'll talk about sort of how we think about bootstrapping liquidity in new markets. Yeah, and sort of the results of the program we've launched right now. So I don't know how much you guys are sort of thinking about DeFi, but I'll just summarize what I think is the most sort of interesting parts of it. And you can read up about it on plenty of sources online. So one obvious thing is that DeFi means, for instance, that you can trade your asset completely permissionlessly without any KYC and stuff like that. So right now there might be some centralized exchange you use to trade, or you might trade peer-to-peer. But sort of the point with DeFi is that you can do this on sort of a decentralized platform. But it's also, so if you want to take a loan on your capital, if you have a bunch of Zcash and you'd like to borrow against that, you couldn't do that on chain on Zcash, right? But you could do this on Ethereum because of the smart contract capabilities. And also the idea around sort of earning yield, like having a savings account that you might go to your bank, traditional bank, to sort of get, I don't know what the interest rates are today, and if they're, in some countries they're even negative. But in DeFi, the yields are very high. So you can borrow, you can lend out your capital, you can earn yield on that from other people, particularly speculators or people who want to go long or short on an asset. They'll pay you a lot of money to borrow your assets. So as a user, it's very attractive to sort of be able to take any asset they own, including Zcash, and doing whatever you want with it. And sort of, yeah, open 24/7 for anyone, no KYC, etc. Everything is on-chain transparent. You can always sort of trace what's going on with your assets that you're putting in. And you can balance the risks. There are many risks in DeFi right now, but there's a lot of ways for you to sort of take the exact balance, take the exact risk that you want to take. And you can do crazy stuff and hedge, etc. But of course, just one point that anything on Ethereum isn't private. And I know Zcash, you doing great stuff with privacy, but when Ren sort of bridges Zcash over to Ethereum, there's no privacy there. We can't capture that privacy. That's inherent to the Zcash chain, or the shielded pools. It's not something we can bring over to Ethereum. But you can go back and forth if you want to. So Zcash and DeFi. So we have a bridge that it's kind of centralized now, but we're developing it and making it more decentralized over time. So you can say our bridges right now, it's hybrid between centralized and decentralized. And there are the wrap.com team, they have this, they do custody, regulated, it's very, very safe as well. But of course, it's centralized, completely centralized. They will stay centralized. But you can use wrapped Zcash through them, or you can use RenZEC through us. And there's a lot I could say about RenVM, but we can maybe take that later if anyone's wondering about how RenVM works. So then the challenge is sort of bootstrapping liquidity. How do you do that? And we're working on that right now. Because liquidity is what you need to sort of be able to do all of these DeFi things. You can't borrow Zcash if there is no liquidity. So then, if there aren't any users who show up to borrow Zcash, there won't be any suppliers either. So it's a tricky thing to sort of get going from if you're starting fresh. And then building and lobbying for integrations. That's also sort of the core thing if you want to increase Zcash's sort of usability within DeFi. So yes, as I mentioned, so Zcash is very liquid on centralized exchanges. I just checked. So 3 top exchanges, 24 volume is really high, obviously, like 50 million just on one trading pair on Binance, Zcash to USDD, as well on Huobi and Coinbase. Like there's a lot of liquidity, there's a lot of trading going on for Zcash. So how do you get that volume, that liquidity over to a new like DeFi platform like Ethereum? So as an example, this is wrapped Bitcoin by the BitGo team. They launched in 2018. At the end of 2018 was like the first contract transaction. It took them almost 2 years for anything to happen at all. And of course, that also depends on sort of DeFi wasn't big at that time. But either way, Bitcoin was the most liquid asset. But they had no activity for 2 years almost. It was you can't see it on the chart. So it took 2 years, and then they had 1 billion in terms of liquidity on Ethereum. And then it only took another month to reach 2 billion. And today it's at 10 billion about. So that's, it would take a long time, even if Zcash was as liquid as Bitcoin. So it's a challenge for any assets. So as I mentioned before, it's like a two-sided market. If liquidity attracts more liquidity, if you don't have any liquidity to begin with, it's very hard to sort of get that growing. And it has to do with marketing and awareness as well. Like just do people know that they can do this? You could be building the best sort of cross-chain bridge, etc., but not tell anyone about it. And then, of course, no one's gonna learn about it and then start bridging Zcash. And of course, Zcash users are also, particularly in this case, more privacy focused. Ethereum doesn't have any privacy. Like you can maybe use Tornado Cash and stuff like that, but those only work for certain assets that they've whitelisted, and it's very sort of complex and it costs a lot of fees to use. There's like no privacy on Ethereum that you can find on Zcash. It's much more robust on Zcash. And then you have sort of trust building as well. So you could also say that it took 2 years for the BitGo team to build trust in institutions to wrap their Bitcoin. That's also a factor. So the one solution that's basically the one solution that everyone uses now in DeFi is to, is to use liquidity mining. So suppliers will only show up in a market if there are buyers or users of the supply. But suppliers won't, as users can't sort of use an asset like Zcash unless there's a lot of liquidity of it, because to trade, for instance, in a Uniswap pool, it's an automated market maker, the less liquidity, the higher the fees are. So it becomes very inhibitory for people to trade if there's just a little liquidity in the pools. So you need sort of to bootstrap a lot of liquidity. But as I said, it's a problem to get the suppliers to show up if they won't be earning money on it. So the trick is to use something called liquidity mining. You incentivize the suppliers to show up first. So they build up sort of a supply, and you incentivize that by giving them money somehow. And then the users show up afterwards because they know, okay, I can trade through their pools, I can borrow from these suppliers. And then you can start building integrations that is based on these this liquidity. And you sort of have to tie that in with marketing and increasing awareness. And after a while, the aim is to have sort of organic growth take over, or you're going to run out of money for incentives and it's not going to work. So the goal is to have something sustainable, like create the initial sort of growth and then let the rest take over. So this is just something I drew in Paint very quickly. The idea is if you have an opportunity to bring capitals to a new market, there's a chance it will just stay at zero or like close to zero. And there might be some people who sort of visit, they can't do anything with it, and then the supply, they take off their supply and sort of it just lays, it stays at that low threshold. You want to cross that threshold when there's enough liquidity that sort of users come in and trade through the liquidity pools or start borrowing from the suppliers. So you want to reach that level. It's exactly where the level is. It's hard to define. There's many factors involved here, but there's some kind of level where you want to cross that level. So the idea is to use liquidity mining incentives to bring up liquidity up to that point where it crosses that threshold somehow, and then you can turn it off. And so it's sort of like an investment if you're sort of you're staked in this market and you want this market to grow where it benefits you somehow. It's kind of like an investment that you're making. So here's a case study where we first launched our bridge from Zcash to Ethereum in May 2020. We didn't have any liquidity mining incentives at all. And for a very long time, there was very little growth, you could say. And that makes sense, of course. Why would someone bring their Zcash over to Ethereum if there's nothing you can do with it? You can't trade it, or there's not enough, like the order books are too thin or whatever. But maybe we were lucky or something, or our awareness increasing sort of got some big stakeholders or some dolphins that have a lot of Zcash or whales or whatever, that they started bridging over Zcash to Ethereum. And then that sort of naturally creates somewhat of an organic growth where there is enough liquidity now. Okay, we can start trading it through Uniswap. Then someone can buy Zcash on Ethereum, and then they can redeem that to native Zcash and then put that in a shielded pool, and then they don't have to use a centralized exchange at all. But this took a long while, and maybe you want to speed up this process, and that's what sort of liquidity mining incentives are for.
I have a question. What were the difference between the two charts?
Yeah, the right chart is just the Uniswap pool. So that's sort of the that's one of the main places where you can put your Zcash right now. So it tracks nicely. I mean, they track basically because what people were doing, they were bridging Zcash over and putting them in Uniswap pool. So it's just, yeah, they're yeah, sort of the same.
It's like one way to use RenZEC.
Yeah, it's the primary way to use RenZEC right now. So yeah, we're a year past now where we've had Zcash and Ethereum. There's still a limited number of integrations that we have, so when you work with partners or DeFi projects on Ethereum, the main thing they ask for, if we're gonna sort of add Zcash to our lending protocol, they need liquidity, because the way lending works in DeFi is that people over collateralize assets, and then they sort of maybe borrow stable coins, and if they need to get liquidated because their assets fall in price relative to the amount they've borrowed, they have to trade your collateral to stable coins. So you need liquidity to be able to do liquidations automatically. And so for that, you need liquidity basically before you can do lending. And so, as I showed before, there's basically just about 10,000 Zcash on Ethereum right now, and I don't know what that market cap is, but that's like 250 USD per Zcash. It still was 2.5 million USD on Ethereum. So that's like if some really big whale came in and wanted to trade Zcash or wanted to borrow against their Zcash, the DeFi protocols couldn't handle it right now. It would be too much. It would cause too much slippage if some trade had to happen, automatic trade, and so the lending protocols can't integrate Zcash yet.
So just to clarify, the end result would just be that the trade would be really expensive compared to like a centralized exchange or a different Uniswap pool with much more liquidity.
Well, yeah, what could happen is that if you had, let's say you put in 5,000 Zcash in a lending pool, and then you borrowed a bunch of USD against that, and then Zcash just drops in price a little. If this lending protocol had to liquidate your position, it might not get enough stable coins back from that trade because the slippage would be too high. And then the lending protocol would be underwater because of that. And that's like the thing they want to avoid most of all, because then their token holders have to pay for that. So any lending project, they require enough liquidity for basic, regular lending sizes can get liquidated without anything going underwater. They can't take risk, so they don't do investments. So okay, but Zcash might go up in price again, so we can liquidate later. They don't do
right,
that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, as we talked about, Uniswap is the sort of main place people are putting their Zcash right now. Then there's a banker pool as well that's a bit smaller. But you don't basically have lending or borrowing for Zcash yet. We've been pushing for it, but it always sort of, you meet resistance because they require more liquidity. So, and the Ren team, I mean, we might hold Zcash individually, but we don't have a treasury of a bunch of Zcash that we can just sort of bring over to Ethereum and put it in places to sort of increase the liquidity. So, I mean, we can only reach out to Zcash users and tell people about it. But we did manage to get one place where you can sort of a protocol that takes a little bit more risk. So they allow you to collateralize Zcash to borrow stable coins. But the interest rate is high, and you can only borrow 60% of what you put in. So that's basically what you can do on Ethereum right now. And so we're working on, we had this grant we wrote to get some incentives for Binance Smart Chain. So we just launched this last week, finally. It took a while to sort of organize with the right partner. And so April 27th, about that, we had a partner called Value DeFi launch a Zcash pool where you can put our version of Zcash, RenZEC, on Binance Smart Chain, together with Binance's own Zcash token that they can let you get through their centralized exchange. So it allows people to put in Zcash in a pool with another Zcash token. So even if, because these two assets have the same price, there's no like volatility. You won't get any impermanent loss if one token increases in price relative to the other. So it's a safe place to put Zcash and just forget about it, because you'll still be able to withdraw all of that, and you'll earn trading fees from people trading through the tokens. So yeah, and we didn't bridge over to Binance Smart Chain until like earlier this year, so we don't have the history as well. But so yeah, we launched Zcash around March, Binance Smart Chain, nothing happened. No one brought over Zcash to Binance Smart Chain because there was nothing you could do. And then we launched this liquidity mining program last week. So it's still ongoing. But there's obviously a growth. You can see that, okay, something happened, obviously. So that's the goal, to get something to happen. So organic growth can take over. So we'll see, I don't know, like maybe in 3-4 months, the end results of this. But it looks good that people are bridging over Zcash, even if it's not huge amounts in absolute terms. I mean, the idea is still to just cause the initial growth to then let natural growth take over. But so the liquidity mining things, they're ongoing right now still. So we estimate, or we guess, that people will still bridge over more. And then we'll be able to sort of start working on integrations and lending protocols in Binance Smart Chain as well. So like you can earn right now 18% APR on Zcash pool there, which is, I guess that's high, but it's small compared to some other crazy numbers you see in DeFi sometimes. But it's still like nice if you can park that for a while there, set it and forget it, and you'll earn something. So it's an incentive for people to bridge over Zcash. So yes, probably talked more than 15 minutes now. So the conclusion, liquidity mining is sort of the way to bridge or to bootstrap liquidity in DeFi, whichever market you're doing it for. After you get liquidity, you can start getting all of these integrations like lending and borrowing and leverage and all of that, yield farming. And marketing is also important here. Like, you have to sort of get people to know about this opportunity, that you can do this, because there's so much stuff going on that you have to sort of boost your signal against all of the noise. And you can, if you don't want to spend too much money on liquidity mining, you can sort of go heavier on the marketing or the comms, sort of to get people, get as much adoption as possible. And so we from the Ren team, we appreciate any help we can get from you guys. So like our goal is to make our cross-chain protocol as sort of legitimate and used as possible. So, and we care about Zcash. So we're pushing for Zcash, of course. That's part of my job. And I'm pushing Bitcoin as well, and etc. But any help we can get from the Zcash community is awesome, because then we can, yeah, do all of this. We can get more growth quicker. And also, you don't have to sort of give money to get people coming. You can also just seed with liquidity. You put in liquidity in pools, then you can withdraw them later. But when you've provided a bunch of liquidity, users can start showing up naturally. So if you have a bunch of assets that aren't doing anything, and you're fine with you're fine with the smart contract risk and the RenVM risk, you can sort of just put liquidity on the chain, earn maybe not a lot of rewards, because it will take a while until users show up. But you can put liquidity there, and it's a signal to people that, okay, there is liquidity, we could do something here. And yes, I'm writing in these two threads on the Zcash forum a lot. So I try to post any news there. If you want to know more about what we're doing, you can just reach out to me anytime, or Telegram, Twitter, or forum, or yeah, just DM me or whatever. Yes, I'm done.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this is a really helpful overview. All right, if folks have questions, could you use the raise hand button in Zoom? That can keep things organized. And if I always say, if nobody has questions, I always am like full of endless questions. But I'll give other folks a turn first. Anyone?
Okay, I have a question. So what are the risks associated with using this? There's obviously some custodial risk, I believe, and then there's technology risk.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those?
Yeah, there's a lot of risks. There's many things that are overlapping. So for instance, if you're bridging through RenVM, then you have to deal with the fact that there's some custodial risk. I mean, we're working on making our system as safe as possible. So right now we've been practicing safety first. So we wanted to decentralize earlier, but since we got a lot of activity and a lot of people bridging, we got the amount of money got quite high. So we were like, okay, we have to take things slower and focus on safety. But custody is one part. Then if you put it over on Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, of course, there's this other chain now that doesn't have the same properties as Ethereum. So I don't know, like Ethereum could crash, maybe like pause. There's a hard fork that causes chaos that might not happen with Zcash, or there's a double spend attack on Ethereum. So of course, you're adding the risk of the other chain that you're bridging to. But of course, Ethereum is pretty safe. Like there's nothing going on the layer 1 level that's sort of crazy. And then you have the DeFi application risk that you're using. So if you have something like Compound, which is a popular lending protocol on Ethereum, I mean, they're sort of heavily audited. They don't have, they have this whole DAO thing where they've done stuff with the smart contracts, so they don't have admin control over certain parts. They might have admin control on one part of their contract, which might enable them to do something, but maybe they can't steal your funds. It's somewhat difficult for a user to sort of learn about all these risks and make an informed decision about, do I want to take this risk? So I don't have too many like recommendations to make here. It's something you have to make your own informed decision as best as you can. Ask people that you trust that seem to know stuff. Get their opinion on it. And if you are technical, you can sort of read audits on these. If you're using Compound, and you can read, okay, what the audits on Compound, they're public, so you can read them and think, okay, do I mind this? Is this like a risk I can take? Is it worth the potential yield? So it's a very complicated topic. Risk is sort of the biggest one of the biggest things in DeFi. That's why you're earning a lot of yield, because there is a lot of risk. Like some institutions aren't using DeFi yet because they're not comfortable with the risk, and because of that, the interest rates are higher than in traditional finance. So I mean that's where, yeah, the high risk, high reward, basically.
Thank you.
Any other questions from people besides me? So one of my first questions is, what do you know about the users of RenVM and or DeFi, but especially RenVM? Like, do you know anything about their geography or the number of users or anything like that?
It's that's sort of data we would like to have. We would like to have more of that kind of data. So on our front, there's not much we can sort of track aside from our front ends, and we have sort of limited knowledge there. I think sort of what I can tell from all the people who are sort of chatting with us on Telegram, so it is, of course, a mixed group of people, but it's probably like Western focused still. Like a lot of the users we're talking to are English speaking, so Europe or the US. So we're trying, of course, to have a broader reach in the Asian market. But it's hard to know, who our users are, because we're not asking people who use our service anything like.
Right. Part of the draw is not having KYC and taken to the extreme. We struggle with this a lot, right? Like we're focused on privacy, so in a sense, anything we can learn about our users means we're not doing enough for privacy. You know, it's like this balancing act. So I was curious to see if we could like combine information, even if it's we still have to be respectful of privacy, but if there are any trends or anything. So the point about people showing up on forums speaking English, that's something that's useful. I was curious about your team. Is it how big is the Ren team and where are they from?
I think we're about 15 people now. Most are Australian. We have a few people in India as well, very brilliant people. And then we have like 2 people from Europe, me and one of the front end folks, and then Michael, who's the CEO, is US based. It's pretty mixed.
Cool.
We don't have anyone from South America yet or Africa, but we're expanding our team. So
nice.
we're hiring folks.
Yeah, good to know. So like switching to a slightly different direction, I've played with, I used RenVM from a shielded wallet for fun, and ended up doing a trade or 2 trades through the Uniswap pool with Ethereum. And it was really awesome in a lot of ways. Like I love the no KYC, like no account or anything. You just show up and you can do it. For me, that's beautiful. But there were still like a lot of steps, and you know, I had to use MetaMask and my shielded wallet, and then wait in between steps. So I'm wondering if you have pointers on front ends, like user interfaces that streamline that or make it easier to use that you already know about, or if you also know about efforts to like make that easier for users. It could be general to any RenVM, not necessarily a Zcash. I just want to learn more about how to streamline that.
Yeah, I mean, our team is sort of heavily focused on UX, but we're starting slow. So one of our plans is to have users when you're minting, at least, that you don't need to have Ethereum in your wallet to mint on Ethereum, that you could just do it in one step, and it takes the fee from the Zcash itself, so pays for the fee. And so that kind of UX that removes a few of the steps is where our goal. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to mint. But then yes, it's complicated if you want to sort of tie this in with Uniswap trade. You can build it. So Uniswap, for instance, wouldn't build such a front end, but someone else, a third party, could build an interface that just ties together all of these transactions into one transaction, or 1 + 1. So you have to handle confirmation times. That's one part. We have a very high confirmation time on Zcash right now because we copied that from Kraken. But 24 is maybe too much. But you can also build a service that takes confirmation risk. So there can be a pool of RenZEC that's already minted, and then when they detect that you made a deposit to their address, but that's confirming, then they can send you some RenZEC immediately for a fee to sort of squeeze that confirmation time down. So you could do that, and you can combine that with a front end and also does the gasless transaction and does a trade, for instance. It's a lot of work. It's not something that the Ren team itself can do, because we have to focus on our core protocol, working it out and adding features. But it's something that a front-end team could build. I don't know of any. I know one team that's working on that for Bitcoin specifically. Maybe they could be incentivized to also add Zcash as one of the assets there as well.
Yeah. Who is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Which
but
team?
Zero Confirmation, it's called.
Cool. Neat. Thanks. So I still don't know that much about like the design and operation of Ren. What, as a user, what kind of fees does Ren itself? I'm assuming I'm paying fees, right, for using the bridge somehow. What form do they take, and what do they look like? And also, how could they change in the future? Like, are they constrained by governance, or could one day, like, the fee structure totally changes?
Yeah, so it's under governance control right now. So we initially started, it's just a flat 0.1% fee in the beginning. That's been increased now to 25 bips. Yeah, it can change in the future if governance feels that way. There's no fee for keeping it on any a chain. It's just taken during the minting or burning. And then there's, of course, if you're minting on Ethereum, Ethereum is very congested. Their transaction fees are high, so you have to pay that step as well, which has been a huge blocker in a way for a lot of people who maybe just want to bridge over 1K USD. Then they have to pay $100 to mint. That's crazy. That's because of Ethereum, not because anything that Ren's doing strange. But we're expanding to multiple chains. So Binance Smart Chain was one first, like a demonstration that we can do multiple chains. So it's cheaper to do stuff there. But there's also a lot of talk about Solana. We're gonna integrate Solana, hopefully release that this month. And a lot of different layer ones that have different. Of course, there's different risks involved in, is their consensus protocol as safe, etc. How come they can make stuff cheaper there? What trade-offs are they doing? But we're also working on Ethereum layer 2, so you can mint directly to an Ethereum layer 2. So you have the same safety assumptions as Ethereum layer 1. There might just be like a time delay or something. So we're working on that as well. So, I mean, the market will obviously decide which chains are the most used ones, and that will include chains people use to bridge assets over. So yeah, we wished we could make it cheaper on Ethereum layer 1, but that's not in our control. But yeah, so we'll just integrate as many chains as possible, basically.
Yeah, how do you choose which chains to focus on, like, next?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of sort of things going into consideration there, but so partly sort of security, like, has a chain been out for a while? Has it had any attacks, double spend attacks on it? For instance, Ethereum Classic, we're not considering on integrating Ethereum Classic because it had multiple 51% hash attacks. And yeah, it has too little hash power to be safe, for instance. Then it's also sort of how easy is it to integrate a new chain. So Binance Smart Chain was easy to integrate because it's just a copy of Ethereum. So we can easily replicate our system there. And that will be the same for many chains we're adding this month. There will be Ethereum EVM chains. So they're basically like Ethereum with a different consensus mechanism. So that's one part of it. Then it's also what's the potential in integrating this chain. So Solana has a lot of hype right now, and we got acquired by Alameda, so we of course sort of incentivized to work with Solana a lot because Alameda is a big stakeholder there, but also because Solana is potentially one of the chains that will be sort of used a lot in the future. So of course we don't know, but so we do a lot of integrations and we'll see what sticks. And then we prioritize just based on how much value is there in focusing on that.
Right. Yeah, thanks. So we are coming up on the hour. I have one last question though, unless anyone else has any. Scanning for hands. So yeah, my question was, are you or the other folks
I
on
had a
the
little
Ren
side
team?
project that I wanted to present, but carry on.
Oh, okay. But this question is burning a whole.
Go on.
I just wanted to ask if you have seen any of the discussion around Zcash about multi-asset support. Like some people say user-defined assets. We've started saying Zcash shielded assets because they're going to be shielded. Have you noticed that, or do you have thoughts or feedback on that?
I've seen it here and there, but I don't personally know much about it myself, but I would love to learn more about it.
Okay. Good to know.
I'm not sure if the technical team has been thinking about it as well, but it's definitely something very interesting if we could. So the idea would be to sort of maybe bridge Bitcoin over to Zcash. Is that the if that was possible through RenVM, we would be super interested in doing that, of course.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll get back to you on that and try to help you get plugged into those conversations. All right, let's, we're up at the end of the hour. So Dara, I'm so sorry, I forgot that you signed up for the open mic. Do you think you could do like a 2-minute spiel, or do you need 5 minutes?
Yeah, I can do a 2-minute spiel. Can you see that?
Awesome. Yep.
You should be seeing yeah, okay. So this is describe curve, which is basically what it says on the tin. It's you give it a specification of an elliptic curve, and it tells you about that curve in terms of what are its security properties, how would you implement it securely, what are the pitfalls of trying to implement it, what might you use instead. So there's a previous project called Safe Curves by Dan Bernstein and Tanya Langer, which sort of was very prescriptive in terms of the curves that it said were safe. And so things have moved on. We've got new techniques and new formula for doing different kinds of curves. So some of the criteria in safe curves are now obsolete. And so part of the aim here for describe curve is to bring this up to date to elliptic curve crypto in 2021 to support things like pairing friendly curves, which are quite a bit more complicated and have other security criteria that you need to track, but also just sort of to be less prescriptive and to describe a wider range of curves. So basically, you just give it a curve in a very sort of user-friendly format. Well, I think this is user-friendly because this is basically just how you would describe the curve informally to another cryptographer. And it isn't, so there is a fixed syntax that you need to use, but it's fairly clear what this is. And so as you can see from I only created this repo 6 hours ago. So there isn't very much there yet, and it's not public yet. It's a private repo. But there documentation that I've written already. So, for example, this is the documentation of how you specify a curve. Okay, and it's going to be written in Sage, which is a really nice language for doing this kind of thing.
Cool.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah. Are you going to make it public soon?
Yeah, so it'll be public as soon as it's MIT licensed, and it'll be public as soon as it's sort of vaguely useful. I just didn't want to publicize it quite yet because there's no point in doing it when you can't actually run it.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay, let's wrap up. And I just wanted to check one last thing with Max. Do you have any requests or parting thoughts for the Zcash community?
Yeah, I mean, just try it out if you're interested. Talk to your Zcash friends, see if they're interested in trying it, and give any feedback to us. Absolutely, like if there's something that's strange or something with the UX is bad, or you're unsure about something, just let us know. Like I'll answer immediately if I'm awake. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thanks everyone for coming to the May 2021 Gardening Club. We'll
Thank
see
you,
you all
Nathan.
next time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks for coming, Max.